At this session, we're going to talk about deliberative technology and how we can use it to discuss polarizing the legislative processes in democracies. There's a lot of workshops and a lot of short talks and discussions. I don't need. And discussions around delibtech, and already people are calling it delibtech, as if it existed a long time ago. One of the aims of this workshop is kind of ground that conversation with real-life examples of projects that have been implemented in real life on delibtech from different contexts in Kenya and Spain. I'm gonna ask my guests to join me. We have Nerima and Nil, and I'm first going to ask both of you to introduce yourself in relationship to the topic of the panel. Start with
okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Nerima, and I'm the director of Siasa, which is a youth organization that we formed 10 years ago, Civic Tech Online. And how we are here is we are partners with Build Up under ZKE. And I know that Alan already did a presentation around that. So we're using platforms like Polis, Ramesh, WhatsApp bots to get young people to engage on policy processes.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Nil Homedes. I'm the director of the Decidim Association. We are the non-profit association who's behind the Decidim project, and we are the ones maintaining that digital commons that is the source code of Decidim. And well, if you don't know, Decidim is a digital platform for citizen participation and community governance, and it's being used around the world by more than 450 organizations. We have presence in more than 30 countries, and yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Nil. Nerima, I'm sad to say that Alan presented ZKE in 5 times in the past week, but not to this audience.
Oh.
So you're gonna have to explain it again.
Oh, Alan. Okay. Sure. So ZKE basically stands for Gen Z Kenya, and it developed from the protests that happened in Kenya last year, where you had thousands of young people going to the streets and calling on government to be more accountable, and it was a trigger from the finance bill. The idea is to use these platforms to get to what are young people actually saying, because there were so many platforms, a lot of them on social media, but how do we aggregate this information to have collective information about this is the touch point of young people across the country. So we are currently in partnership with Build Up, where we're having conversations across the country in Kenya. We've gone to multiple counties, about 8 of them now, and it's both offline and online. So you'll have focus group discussions and then bring discussions online as well, so that people can also participate and give their views and feedback. And some of the information has been really fascinating, from corruption in education to access to healthcare. And right now we're working on reaching some of the remotest parts of Kenya and finding out that those young people there are also having the same challenges as young people living in urban areas. And right now what's fascinating is health is a huge issue for young people right now.
Can you talk a little bit more about the online element? Like, how did you reach out to people? What platforms did you use? And how did you kind of harvest outcomes?
So Siasa, we're a youth organization, and we have county-based organizations that we work with. And so I said that it's hybrid. So we will have town halls, but at the same time, we're using social media like Facebook or TikTok. We're recording all of this information. And people are also able to participate in those conversations through the comments. The other element is through WhatsApp channels that we have on ZKE, where there is a bot who will prompt you to ask you on various issues what you think. And we also use police, where now when we're touching on particular policies, so we've managed to get recommendations on 4 particular bills, for instance, and getting views from young people on what they think about these policies and their recommendations. We've also tested Ramesh. That was very interesting because we used that element partnering with young members of parliament. So members of parliament who are below the age of 40, and having a select group of 100 student leaders coming into parliament and discussing a particular bill and getting their opinions and those opinions on social media. So it's all these various platforms, and then coming up with, these are the main maybe 10, 20 things that's coming from young people specifically.
I see. Thank you so much, Nerima. I think this is very clear, and I have so many follow-up questions. But I have to move to Nil. Again, to ground the conversation, if you can tell us a little bit more about Decidim, but also about, because it's a deployable platform, so about some of the deployments that you have done, some of the deliberative processes that you have run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so first of all, Decidim is a free and libre open source project. That means that the code is open and available for everyone. We use an Afero GPL 3 license. That's one of the most freedom licenses that exists in the market. And Decidim, as I said, is being used around the world by different countries. We have mainly being deployed in the local layer by municipalities. For example, here in Barcelona, the city council that was the creator of the project, in fact, they are using Decidim to run their participatory budgeting process. Also in New York, they are running participatory budgeting process using Decidim. But also we have, for example, the Brazilian federal government using Decidim as the national platform for running their participatory process. They are like defining like a national plan for culture, or the government 4 years plan was discussed with the citizens using Decidim at a national level. And more recently, those days we are starting, for example, to work with, in Mozambique, with some civil society organizations that are going to run a national dialogue process where they are going to discuss about democratic reforms in their country. And yeah, we are going to run this like huge national process to discuss how they want to improve and change their country. So yeah, we have different types of applications, and any kind of participatory process can be deployed in Decidim, because one of the key things of our software is that it's very customizable. So you have like different modules, different pieces, and you can build your own participatory process, choosing what piece to use at every moment that fits better your needs. So that's one of the killer features of Decidim, that it's very easy to customize, and you can run all the cycle of a participatory process, from communication to deliberation, decision making, voting, and finally like all the accountability part. So you also can also like communicate the results and see the state of execution of a participatory outcome.
Thank you, Nil. Now that we have the seed set up, my first question is around trust building. So as a convener or a facilitator, you or your organization, your platform is facilitating a discussion and engaging with different stakeholders, with participants, with decision makers. So how do you build this trust with participants and also with the other stakeholders and decision makers that you're engaging with through the deliberative process?
Yeah, that's like a really good question and very relevant, because well, at least in our case, we are providing the software. I mean, we are maintaining the software, but the software it's completely in hands of the government. So we cannot control what they are doing with it. So we will talk about this later, I think, about this risk and challenges. But yeah, from our point of view, when we talk about participation, I think that deliberation is like one of the pieces of a participatory process, but participation is like the bigger umbrella, so I prefer to talk about participation. I think that participation, when we talk about participation, we are talking about redistributing power, and that means like sharing power or giving power to citizens, from government to citizens, and I think that's key. That's because if not, if you're not sharing the power, if you are not actually giving power to the people to shape proposals, to define whatever you are discussing, then you're not going to have this like momentum, you're not going to have participation. So that's key. And I think that one of the questions when you are designing a participatory process that you need to ask yourself is, okay, and you need to explain very, very clear that to the public, that who and how the decision is going to be made. Exactly. Okay, maybe we are discussing about how to transform a square, a public square, or maybe we are discussing about a huge topic about the constitution of a country. Okay, but exactly who is going to approve the constitution, how is this decision is going to be made, and those are things that need to be communicated from the very beginning of the process, and that transparency is key to engage and to build trust on the process.
I see. Thank you. And back to you, Nerima, with the same question, but also how do you, I think, in your experience, how do you encourage participants to engage with your process, and also to how to sustain that momentum with the youth in Kenya?
The element of who we are and what we stand for was super important, especially because of the moment we were in terms of not trusting government, what government says, what government does, because we've seen social contract being broken, from the promises being made, and people are like, I don't believe in government anymore. So I would say that our work in the community, the fact that we have partners that are youth groups in the community and people knew us, made it easier. And I'd also say that we have had to be, in some instances, rebellious, where that element of the trust and the openness, and this is still an argument that we still have, where we push back, where it's like young people have to own this process and feel that it's theirs, and not just feel, they are aware that it's theirs. And that reassurance is so important. And then this feedback loop mechanism, because after I've said these are the challenges I have, so what? What are you gonna do about it? Like, the little wins to young people is super, super important, just to show, because of your feedback, this is what was submitted, and this is what government has done. Because a lot of us come from countries where government is just unresponsive, and they just do not give feedback back to citizens. And so that element is also key. And I would say that what I really like, for instance, about Polis is that it's very difficult to have someone very influential to influence ideas. And that's important because we do live in a society through social media that someone with the largest following is where all young people will gravitate to. So we have politicians with such large followings on social media and influencers, for instance. So we had to specifically target influencers that had the same mindset that we did, and almost have a vetting process of the kind of person that's encouraging people to use this platform was also extremely key in this process. And I would say finally, it's something that you have to work on every single day. Trust, you know, we talk about breaking trust, but building trust also takes almost consistency and the discipline of always standing on the right side, even through the influence, because we have had to tell government this belongs to young people. Because as soon as they see it growing with influence, they're like, okay, now give it. Okay, bring it. And you're like, no. And so that pushback, I know Caleb and Alan have seen me sometimes, I'm just like, enough. And so you have to have someone who is very firm on it owning and belonging to people.
Yeah, we have to have someone like her.
Thank you.
My second question is around safety. So we talked about trust, now we want to talk about safety. And how do you make sure that the online space is a safe one for the participants? And what are kind of the challenges or the risks that you might face, and how you make sure that to make that space safe? What are the measures that you can take to make sure that the space is safe?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think that in order to make like an online space safe, the first thing that you need to do is to define a set of rules that, well, usually in the field that I came from, that it's open source, we tend to define codes of conducts within our communities. So that can be like the first step, to define a code of conduct, a set of rules, that if something wrong happens, like if someone behaves in a bad manner, you can trigger that code of conduct and can moderate on that. But moderation is the last resource, of course. So first of moderation, you need to try to create a good atmosphere in those online spaces. And I think, for example, in Brazil, we've seen Brazil, as you may know, is like a very polarized society, and in their Decidim platform, what it has been surprising, it was that there were like too many hate speech, like so little hate speech, and they don't have like a lot of work moderating and so on. And that was because they invest a lot on creating this good atmosphere, on repeating the rules, on trying to create a good participatory atmosphere. And I think that it's something contagious between participants when you join an online space, right?
I see. And in terms of like within Decidim, I have this question for you is, I know it's different between different contexts, but what's your take on kind of anonymity versus how people would sign in, how identities within the online space is linked to identities of the people behind their computers?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because in fact in Brazil, one of the things that also explains that is that to log in their Decidim platform, you need to use like their electronic ID system. So anonymity in the Brazil Participativo platform is kind of at risk, and for us, anonymity it needs to. We designed Decidim so you can participate in an anonymous way, but in some implementations, some of the governments can like break that. And in the case of Brazil, I mean, you can be anonymous publicly, but maybe in the backend someone can track who is behind those comments, because the login is linked to the electronic ID system. And that also explains why maybe there are not so much hate speech comment and so on, because people feel like they cannot be anonymous. So there's this trade-off also, but we really believe that anonymity it's a right, and we designed the Decidim. So, for example, what happens if in Brazil in 2 years a new government appears and then they use the data of the platform to track people and to persecute them because what they say in the platform. So we designed the Decidim in order to guarantee the anonymity and that governments cannot like track those participants. But also in some implementations, as I was saying, this can be kind of surpassed. But yeah, it's a difficult balance.
Thank you for adding the nuances. You said that what the youth had in common is not trusting the government. So from that as a starting point, how did you manage to make sure that there's a safe space for participation on this large scale within ZKE?
Such a tough question. I would say that that question has come up where we are aware that there's surveillance happening on our devices, and people are worried about sharing their honest, authentic opinions. The challenge has been that I don't trust government either. And so we've been honest about that. And so already when you're coming to the table, there are partners there who they're like, okay, we get it, and we want to mediate and mend this relationship. So what has really helped is the authenticity of it, and just being realistic that this could be great, and it could also just land us in the same position. And I would say that element of one of the questions that kept coming in when we started was, when I'm sending this stuff, who's on that other side seeing this? And so letting them know that, no, this is not the government right now that's holding it, took a bit of time, but then also there were some people who were concerned about it, but then that began to dissipate as they began to see the results. I would say that it has also helped when governments realizing that they cannot ignore, especially millennials, Gen Zs coming in. They are very adamant and vocal about, corruption, lack of accountability, etc. So they are getting to a point where they're like, okay, look, we've been ignoring populations for decades. This is one generation that we are struggling to ignore. And it has helped that government is now realizing that they cannot really continue to work in the same way that they've been working. But another partner that has assisted is these institutions that are non-governmental. If UN, for instance, wasn't there in the middle just sort of grabbing us, there was a time I was dragged into a meeting with the Attorney General's office, they would have not given me any time of day. So it's also realistic for us to be like, sometimes our governments listen to other powers. And as long as those other powers now are like, okay, we are ready to speak to you, they will listen to us. And so that has also helped to see that they are not as powerful as well. There's also somebody else who's pulling their strings, and having that in the open, in front of young people as well, allows them to see that, they are not as God Almighty as we always think them to be, has also helped.
Yeah. I want to move on to a different topic. I want to talk about biases. And to simplify, usually in a room, the person with the loudest voice would speak the most. I don't think that would reflect online in a texting group, but I think there's a lot of biases that can be moved offline to online, and I also think that there's other biases that would be created online. So can you tell us a little bit, I'm gonna ask you both the same question, can you tell us a little bit about the biases that you have seen within the different processes that you have run, and then how did you address them? Especially, for instance, I'm just going to give another example. Usually, people with lower access to the internet struggle to participate in a timely manner, so they will be less heard as a result of that. So I will start with you.
I mean, I think that social inequalities are everywhere and in all the spheres of our life. So also in participation or in any kind of deliberative process, they appear, they are there. And when you design a participatory process, you need to be aware of that and need to design a participatory process to at least try to rebalance those inequalities, or, well, you're not going to change the existing inequalities, but at least you need to do something on it. Usually in online or offline spaces, always like the most educated people is the one who usually participates more. And I can talk about 2 examples on how different governments, when running their participatory budgeting process, what they are doing. For example, here in Barcelona, the city council tries to convene specific meetings with specific migrant communities that usually doesn't go to the public center to participate in the open meeting. So if you if you address directly to that community and convene them and try to work with them, then they are going to engage more with the process. So that's one point, like work with those communities that are traditionally more excluded in your society. And also, when you add like an online layer or a digital layer in a participatory process, then different things happens, right? One of the things is that you are opening a new space for participation that can help some profiles to participate. For example, like someone like maybe let's talk about like a single mother who had like 3 children and it's very busy, and she cannot be in the public center on Tuesday at 7 p.m. because at that time she is at home taking care of their family. But maybe this single mother would be able to participate asynchronous through the online platform, right? But also at the same time, when you create that online platform, you are like creating a new barrier. So you are opening doors and closing doors at the same time, because like older people or people with like less digital skills will find it more difficult to participate on it. And in order to avoid that or to address that, what you need to do also is like to convene those meetings in like face-to-face and have someone with like a tablet or a laptop or whatever who helps then the like elder people or people who has like less digital skills, and so they had also the opportunity to participate, or they just write like their idea, their proposal, their contribution in a sheet of paper, and then the facilitators write it and upload it to the platform. So that's the way, like the secret ingredient of this is like hybridization. So how you combine online and offline spaces are key to avoid those biases. I think, and also I think that also because I'm always talking about like this institutional participatory process, and I think that we also need to talk about like self-organized processes by civil society actors are also participatory and deliberative and democratic process, and maybe in those processes sometimes those civil society actors they are more capable to engage with the less with the more excluded sectors of a society. So also that, to have this in mind.
I would also say that I like that we started off with an openness in terms of, you know, video to text and language. And what we have learned is, in the beginning, when the first pilot of ZKE, we came up with the topics. And so the first topic was, have you ever taken a bribe? And when we launched that, it was very fascinating to see how the conversation changed to, I pay my school teacher, my child's school teacher, to have my child sit at the front. Is this a bribe? And then all of a sudden, we see this whole conversation about the education sector and how this is now normal. You know, this is not considered a bribe. And so I would say our assumptions of what the subject matter is a biasness, and we actually now learn from the public that this is actually the pain point that people want to discuss. I would say also the other thing is platforms like TikTok have grown exponentially compared to other platforms, and it's also learning that TikTok has a certain like data bundle at home. So it's cheaper to be on TikTok than any other platform. And so this is something that, you know, didn't realize until we had started, and we're seeing the engagement is now more authentic or engaging on those platforms. And then I would say also what you talked about, the people that you do engage, you will always have the number of women being fewer just because of access to our device, access to the internet. So in our forums, when we would provide for the internet there, we assumed that people would log on and also continue the conversation. Huge assumption. You had to have an influencer or someone encouraging people during the conversation. Let's involve people who are not here physically as well. Go ahead and do that. So you have to have that constant push within your conversations. And even sometimes the most quietest of people, they prefer to have that anonymity as well. So they have pseudo accounts. And this is also something where for a young lady, there are some things she wants to say, but she's not going to say it that way. So she'd rather log on as a young man on her account and say whatever she wants to say. And so even that, those personas in terms of, culture and what you can say and can't say is something that we have already physically that we carry onto our online. And the other thing, and finally, and I didn't want to forget it, that's why I typed it down, and let me just look. I would say the various languages. Some of our most viral conversations were not translated. Like when we would, try and translate, this is what this person is saying, it wouldn't have as much as a pic. But as soon as we left it as authentic, as that whole community would come and have a whole dialogue, and then we would have to have someone come and translate to us what's going on. So we're seeing that the ethnic dialects are the ones that are having very viral conversations because there are some issues, because a lot of the things we're discussing are painful. Yeah, it's from I'm bribing a teacher to my brother got arrested and he's not been released, my uncle's a drug addict. It's painful stuff, and people prefer to talk about this stuff in their own native sort of language, and they feel safer having that space. And so for us, allowing that space to exist and only translating little bits of it rather than the entire.
Thank you, Nerima. That's definitely a lot to think about. I have one more question, one final question, but at every panel where people always say, we really wish we had more time for questions. We're gonna give more time for questions, and then I'm gonna end with my final question. So we are open for questions. I think there will be moving mics somewhere. And who has a question to the panelists? I surprised the audience. No, it was definitely.
They weren't prepared.
Surprised. Questions? Yeah, go. We will take a few questions, and then we'll answer them.
Perfect. This question is to Nil. You mentioned a lot of polarization in Brazil, and you didn't see very much hate speech on the Decidim platform. And you said they really designed it to be welcoming and wholesome and enforcing community guidelines. Could you speak a little bit more about kind of what specific steps they put in place to really try to mitigate that from a design perspective instead of a moderation perspective?
Mm-hmm. And then you.
This is a question for Nerima. You mentioned that health was a big concern. I just was wondering if you could go a little deeper there. Physical health, mental health. What are the things they have as ideas to improve their health?
And then you have Lena. Yeah. Who else?
Thanks, Nerima, for a great explanation. And Nil, with hundreds of governments taking this on, what can you share with us about why they feel safe to actually act on the decisions? Because this is missing in so many places, right, Nerima? Yeah. So tell us what the secret is, because I hear Audrey Tang speak so convincingly about Taiwan, and then you've got all these other places. What is it? Is it champions inside government? Is it that it worked once and the government didn't topple? Or what's the secret?
Hi. I always like to have nice stories, but I sometimes think it would be more interesting to understand, to get to know where you failed and what may be the limits that you encountered, or the strongest, the weakest points of your tools, and where you would advise not to use it, in which cases.
Please, can you, I'm sorry, can you say your name?
Oh, sorry, I'm Björn from Last Storm in Germany.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you integrate, if at all, people with technical expertise in any given subject matter area. Tarek Masrani.
Did you hear that?
No,
Can you
I
repeat
didn't
that,
get it.
Tarek, please?
How do you integrate into your processes people with technical expertise? So like if health is an issue, how are medical experts integrated into the legislative process?
But you're not talking about the developers.
Subject matter. Yeah, sorry?
You are not talking about developers, like the tech.
No, not software.
Okay.
Yeah, subject
the
matter experts, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the final one.
Thank you very much. Two questions in one to Nerima. At what point do you step out of the movement and just be yourself about your own interests? I come from an African family where it's always said, we have given you protection, we have given you everything you want, and there is no need for you to go out there on the streets. When do you draw the line between going to the streets and actually utilizing the privilege that you have, if you have the privilege anyway? And then the second question is, how do you deal with internal polarization? If we are a movement, we are chasing the same thing, at which point do we realize that we have divided interests somewhere? How do we identify them? How do we deal with them? Thank you, I'm Salim. I'm from Uganda, by the way, neighbors to Kenya. And yeah, it was lovely.
Thank you, Salim. I'm not sure where to start, honestly. Maybe I will start with you, Nil. Yeah.
Yeah, the one that about Brazil.
Practical steps for
design.
that you implemented in Brazil to make sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I already said that I think that the main thing that explains this phenomenon in the Brazil participative platform is the fact that you logged in using your electronic ID, and like that loss of anonymity, I think it's like people who want to do hate speech feel like more exposed maybe, and that explains why there are like less. But also the topics that were bring and the fact that like when at the beginning in the platform they invest that, so like different groups and different concrete people start to create like the first content. So when they launch the platform, you don't arrive there and it was like completely an empty space. Like so the people who arrive first they read some proposals and they read like really good content and really good like contributions, and they feel okay, like that's the place where I can like express myself and contribute actually to shape public policies of the government and so on. So I don't know, I feel like if you work on your community and that community creates like good content and good contributions on that it's something contagious, you know, when a new person arrives to the platform. That can be something that explains the Brazil case, I think. But I mean, I think that I still have some like lack of knowledge to understand better what has happening there to have like the whole picture, you know. I need to talk more with the Brazilian government to understand that.
And then you had another question
Yeah.
on the weakest points. So when would you not, and I think that's a good question, when would you not use, I guess, not your platform, but online deliberation in general, like when would you not use it?
When I'm not going to use that? I don't remember that. But you ask about the limits and the weakness?
Yeah.
Okay. 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 Yeah. I mean, I think that technology has its own limitations, and I already talked about that. I think about the digital divide and so on. But I think that the main limitation is it's on the political layer, especially when it comes in governments and so on, because one of the biggest risks that we have is this participatory washing. So a government launch a process and they say, we are going to open this to participation and so on, but they are just consulting to you. Okay, just give you some ideas, but we are going to do whatever we want. We don't care about your contributions. So that's one of the main risks or limitations on all of the platforms and on all the participation field, I would say. And yeah, I would say that's one of the main risks that you can have. Also, in online platforms, what can happen is this idea of astroturfing that stands for when a group of people they collectively organize themselves or create fake accounts, and they try to simulate a lot of agreement on a specific issue. But to avoid that, we have technological tools like verification tools. So, for example, you can verify the identities of participants against the municipal census of a city or the national census of a country or whatever. So one real person, one vote. So then you're cutting this possibility of astroturfing. But that's also a risk on online platforms.
Thank you. Nerima has been noting down. She's on page 3 already.
Salim's question is so hard.
Do you want to start with the question around the complexity of the health issue, and then also maybe how you can integrate the expert opinion, expert on the subject matter within the health topic, so within the deliberation on health?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, to just break down that Kenya transitioned into, well, not really a new health system called SHA. And it was initially NHIF, which had been there for decades. And that transition left a lot of people in this limbo of not having access to health insurance and healthcare services and medication. So we have genuinely lost a lot of people that have actually died because of that transition, and we have people who are struggling to meet medical bills because of that transition. So it's still going through the teething problems. And one of the things I also need to describe is the average age in Kenya is 19. So when you're talking about health, you're talking about sexual reproductive health. You're also talking about a lot of women in their childbearing ages. You're talking about children below the age of 5 in some of these facilities, and there's no medication. And a lot of the issues are, I need an ambulance, a lot of, maternal deaths. And so these are the pain points where people actually have real situations and cases where even before we came here, there's a very famous singer who passed away because she didn't have insurance and she was left to bleed to die and literally buried over the weekend. So these are real issues for people. So that's the kind of health. And they're talking about they want access. It's dignity. It's part of our constitution to have access to health. But there's also a rise of suicide because, again, average age is 19, very high unemployment, and we're talking about people going to school and not having opportunities, so very high levels of depression. So this has also become center stage conversation, and alcoholism and drug abuse. So for many young people, this is a very important issue. So when it comes to discussing these issues and breaking it down, we do have virtual conversations on various platforms where we will involve different, like county, we call them CCs, like county ministers on health, and also we would have people who are experts break down what this means, what this transition means, etc. And even when we're looking at, say, certain laws, there is a bit of framing that has to come in place. So when we're sharing out information, there's a breakdown of what does this actually mean, and we do try and simplify that. So that's also another element, the element of framing, the simplification of the information so that people can come in and share, do I agree with this or not? So you do need that technical expertise to make sure that it's correct. And sometimes when you're asking for people's opinions, when you leave it now too open, it's also overwhelming for them because they're like, I don't know if this is a good idea or not. And some of them just, put one word or a whole paragraph. And some would prefer if there's something summarized for me to see, does this fall in line with what I believe or not? And so having a bit of both worlds is also important to see what our audiences prefer.
You want to take a break?
Like a joke. Anyway.
No, you have 2 more questions.
I know. Yes, let me take a break.
Yeah. So, back to you, Nil, with the Lena question around, and I'm sorry if I'm like butchering your question right now, but it's about it's about governments deploying Decidim and why are they.
Yeah. I mean,
can you?
The first thing to say is that we are like a very small non-profit organization. We have like only 7 people working in the Decidim Association, and we don't have a sales department. We don't have any kind of marketing strategy, any kind of that. So, and that's not trivial because that answers to the thing of we don't want to approach governments to say, hey, you need to use our tool because of whatever. We are trying to sell you that. No, because also we are not making any kind of business with that because we are not providing the software. The software is being provided by IT companies in the local context. So we are only maintaining the source code, okay? So we are not interested in like selling a lot of Decidims around the world. Our approach has been always governments needs to come to us and say, we want to use your technology. And then sometimes I have said to some governments, no, you don't really need Decidim for that. Maybe with a WordPress, you are okay because you only want to announce something. You are not really wanting to open the participation. And now answering the question, usually in those governments that choose Decidim is because they made a benchmark and they decide to go with Decidim because it's open source. And I think that this is something very important because in the open government field, we always talk about transparency, accountability as key principles that are not negotiable for example, parliaments or governments and so on. But technology is actually making some public decisions. So why, if we are asking for governments and parliaments to be open and transparent, why we are not requiring that to technology? I think that this must be open source and be accountable and so on needs to be a requirement for technology. And that's why the governments choose us, because they can see how our technology works. It's open source. They can install in their servers, have total control of their data. And when it comes inside the organization, one key thing is that usually we have a Decidim believer inside that organization that I don't know why exactly, but they fall in love with the project, and maybe then after deploying the Decidim, we invite them to Barcelona, and then they enjoy it a lot, the Decidim Fest and so on, because we have like a really human community also. Our community, it's like 100 people, something like that, but very cohesionate, you know, and it's like we are all of us friend of us, and I think that those Decidim believers inside the governments are the ones who are like fighting to actually implementing the tool in a good manner, deploying new participatory processes and so on. But also it's true that those Decidim believers, sometimes they are just like public servants, and then the politician arrives and, and say, well, we are not going to do that exactly as you were saying, and okay, so it's always like this internal fight. But yeah, it has been exactly that, the history of the Decidim, that people come to us, and because of our technology, and because of also our philosophy and our vision of democracy. Because also in the civic tech field, I feel that there are a lot of salesperson around, more worried about selling the product, and they don't give a shit about democracy, honestly. Some of them, they don't give a shit. But we have a vision of what democracy should be. We came from a movement that was like the 50M movement here in Catalonia, in Spain, that were protesting for major changes, for more democracy here. And from that civil society movement, we then have started to build that project. So we have that vision on what democracy should be.
Thank you so much. You have 1 minute left
Yes.
to answer the question around internal polarization and then
I know.
privilege.
Salim, we will grab drinks later.
And I'm not gonna do like the final question is deleted, and then we'll just end with Nerima. We'll just wrap up with her.
Yeah, but I also want to tell you, and I'm sure you know, protests are coming to Uganda, so you'll also have the virus in January. And how do we step away from the movement? I don't even know what that looks like, to be honest with you. But also, remember before the protests in Kenya, we had used all the avenues to speak to our members of parliament. We called them, we texted them, we told them no to the finance bill, and the protest was the last resort. So we normally don't go to the streets unless we have to go to the streets. And I remember even just a few days before, the president, he just didn't give a hoot. And he was with members of parliament, and he was like, no, just ignore those people. And that's how parliament was stormed. But I do think that this is the one chance. I do. I do believe that there are key champions who want to find a way of engaging young people so that it doesn't end up toward people going to the streets. But what I'm hoping for, that it's something that's owned by young people. This needs to be adopted. And perhaps to answer your question in terms of the internal polarization, it's also to know that I'm not perfect myself, and I think there are mechanisms that we can think through to put in place where there's a communal, collective decisions. I think that's important, especially for young people, to support the majority, rather than having one individual that weighs so much power that if they are removed out of the process, the whole process is thrown out the system. And so this is also something we've been thinking through with Caleb and Megan, and what does that communal, community, collective ownership looks like, and having young people at the center of it, and government as partner.
Thank you so much. Our time is up. Thank you for both, really, for a lot of insights, and I know that I have a lot to think about when I go home. And just an invitation to our audience to reach out to our panelists if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any announcement? Any announcements? Yeah.
We're done for the day. Thank you so much. I already said the announcements, but just one more is that we're done at 6, and also you should now leave, even though we love you, because the other event is coming in at 6:30. So don't forget your belongings. and also go away. Okay, and see you tomorrow.